দর্শক সবাইকে শুভেচ্ছা আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি চলতে চলতে অনুষ্ঠানে আপনাদের সঙ্গে থাকছেন মাহফুজ মিশা। আজকে আমার অতিথি ঢাকায় ইউরোপীয় ইউনিয়নের ডেলিগেশন প্রধান অ্যাম্বাসেডর চার্লস হোয়াইটলি। অ্যাম্বাসেডর চার্লস হোয়াইটলি, ওয়েলকাম টু আওয়ার শো। হাউ আর ইউ?
Welcome to the EU delegation.
Happy New Year. Your second time, that is your second mission in Bangladesh, but first ambassadorial mission. So how life is in Dhaka?
Well, I must say I've seen how dramatically changed Dhaka is since I left in 2009. When I left, I think the highest building was the Westin, and there weren't so many high-rises. And of course, things have come on leaps and bounds since then. Also, the infrastructure. So it's tremendous how Dhaka has transformed. I was at a New Year's Eve party last week, and the skyline lit up. It could have been Dubai or elsewhere, you know, with all the fireworks and the high-rises. So you see the change and the prosperity that's come to Bangladesh. Of course, it's not the whole story, but I think Dhaka is a thriving city, and now I think over 20 million people, so it's really
huge.
grown in population, and very noticeable.
So Bangladesh is observing its 50 years of independence, and when Bangladesh was born in 1971, it was said that it's a bottomless basket. So how do you evaluate Bangladesh achievement in last 50 years?
Well, first I would say we extend our warmest congratulations to Bangladesh on the 50th anniversary. You know, we as a long-standing partner of Bangladesh see a country that's transformed in 50 years. It's really quite amazing, the transformation. I think, as you say, all the key social indicators, the development indicators, have transformed remarkably since 1971. I was just doing a little bit of research about how things have changed simply in the 12 years since I left in 2009. And one figure that really struck me was the fact that the life expectancy now has gone from 65 years in 2009 to 72 in that short period of time. So I think Bangladesh has many lessons to teach the world in terms of development progress. And of course now what's very totemic of that is the graduation from LDC status. And that's being managed and will take, you know, there's a plan to make sure that happens in a smooth fashion. And we as a development partner, but not just a development partner, we're a full partner of Bangladesh. You know, with so many areas in which we work with Bangladesh, from trade to climate change to connectivity. You know, it's a very deepened relationship now, and I think development is still part of it. But we must bear in mind that only, you know, 1% of Bangladesh's GDP is now from development assistance. And that's, as you say, the economic growth. I saw the IMF has revised upwards the prediction for GDP growth to 6.6%.
Even amid this COVID.
Precisely. I mean, that's quite remarkable. When you look at the figures around the world, we in Europe took a very big hit to our economies, you know, minus growth, and now slowly we're also emerging. But I think Bangladesh, amongst all the developing countries, when you see that kind of growth, and when you see, for example, how the RMG sector has recovered, I understand the order books are full until May, and that's great news, not only because it's good for the economy, but it's good for the people too. You know, all the women garment workers and people allied to that industry, you know, their livelihoods depend on it. So the fact that exports are back and the business is booming is good news for everybody, I think.
Yeah. You are talking about LDC graduation, and when it will implemented in 2026, then definitely Bangladesh will have some challenges too. Do you think what kind of challenge Bangladesh will have to face after being graduate?
Well, I think first of all, you know, it's not a sort of big bang change in 2026. We have a transition in our relationship on the trading front until 2029. So that gives a lot more time for planning and anticipating any glitches and difficulties there might be. And I think, of course, we are the biggest destination for Bangladesh exports in the world. A recent figure was 24% of exports. Perhaps a more important figure is the fact that 60% of our entire duty-free, quota-free access to the EU market is held by Bangladesh. That's a remarkable, again, to use the word remarkable, a remarkable figure. But clearly there will be challenges. You know, once you stop being an LDC, you lose that automatic right to duty-free, quota-free access to the EU market. And it's similar for other partners, for example, I think the UK. So it's important that that's managed, because what we don't want is a big shock to the system. And I think what Bangladesh's aspirations in the EU context are now are to proceed smoothly to GSP+, which is one of our other big trading regimes.
That will be implemented from 2027, right?
From 2029, they will have everything but arms, which is our duty-free, quota-free access for least developed countries. That will happen until 2029. And then GSP+, we hope and trust, will come into play. But that's a little bit more tricky than the existing regime, because in order to benefit from that, Bangladesh has to both ratify and implement 32 international conventions.
Okay.
I have to say Bangladesh is very well placed on the ratification side, because they've ratified 31 of the 32 and will ratify the final one very soon. So that's well ahead of time. But the key word I used is implemented, and that is subject to quite a rigorous cooperation process. So it's something that's monitored very regularly. Will Bangladesh be implementing these wide-ranging conventions on social conditions, on human rights, on environmental standards effectively? I have every confidence that that will be the case, and we will partner Bangladesh on this transition. So I am very optimistic about that.
Okay. If I recall about Rana Plaza tragedy, you must have remembered that very big incident here. What do you think? Did Bangladesh can respond properly with that wake-up call after Rana Plaza tragedy?
I think that terrible tragedy really galvanized everybody. It galvanized Bangladesh, the government, the business, galvanized international partners. It also galvanized civil society here and abroad. And it has led to remarkable change. Again, I use the word remarkable, because we see, of course the picture isn't perfect, but we've seen quite substantial improvements on the health and safety front. And on the labour side of things, the labour rights side of things. So, as you may know, the EU and Bangladesh concluded an agreement, a national action plan, to advance on the labour standards, and we're working hard with Bangladesh on that. So, another point that I see that of great encouragement is the fact that Bangladesh is a world leader on environmental compliance. You see the LEED certified factories. And that's something that's a real selling point for Bangladesh. I think other countries will have to play catch up, and I do think that consumers pay attention to this. And I was very happy to see the other day that there's a new advert on CNN called "Dreams Are Made in Bangladesh," a very modern advert projecting a very modern Bangladesh. And this is something, the image of Bangladesh and the perception of Bangladesh is changing in the wider world. It's moving away from the basket case, of the old days that people perceived, to what's seen as a modern, thrusting, youthful country with aspirations across many fields, I think. So.
But Ambassador, at the same time, buyers should have some responsibilities. When Bangladeshi garments owner and the exporter is ensuring compliance issues, safety issues, and other issues, then the price might be high. At the same time, it's a competitive market. China, Vietnam, these countries are our big competitor. So if sometimes Bangladesh government said, even our foreign minister said, the buyers should increase the price. So that's another responsibility. You have a very good connection with the buyers, especially from 7 countries of European Union. So did you ever convey this message to them?
We certainly say, everybody wants to see a fair price paid, because again, Bangladesh, the wages that workers are paid depends on securing a decent price for the goods. So I think buyers are more and more aware of that. Also consumers are more and more aware of that. And I tend to think this has to be consumer driven, because if a consumer wants a €1 t-shirt, that used to be the case 10 years ago, but now I think the consumer wants more reassurance that the t-shirt doesn't cost £1 or €1 because young children have been involved in its production, or the buyers have squeezed the wages. So I do believe buyers are becoming increasingly aware of this. And I also, as I've said before, have great faith in the negotiating capacities of Bangladesh business. You have such good businessmen here. I think they're more than capable of negotiating a fair price with the buyers. And even though there are competitors, as you say, China and Vietnam, Bangladesh is the second largest global exporter of garments, has a strong industry, a mass industry, and there aren't really alternatives to Bangladesh when you look at certain elements of garments that go to Europe. Of course, COVID was a major disruption to this, and as you may know, the EU stepped in with support to support the workers, RMG workers and other sectors including leather, who were laid off, so that they didn't enter into poverty again. And we were very proud to partner with Germany and with the government of Bangladesh to do this decent work program, and that's something we hope will be built on to create a more modern social security system in Bangladesh.
Okay. Ambassador Charles, one more thing is about GSP. You are going to review the new GSP system very soon. So what would be the future of GSP for Bangladesh?
Well, we have a proposal on the table. The Commission,
Yeah.
European Commission, has put a proposal that now has to be considered by EU member states and the European Parliament. I think one key development, as you may know, was the removal of the import share criterion. So that could have been an impediment to Bangladesh accessing the GSP Plus system that I talked about. That's not in the proposal, and that's partly due to the very effective lobbying that Bangladesh has done at business and government level. But we need to look at the fine print, and I think Bangladesh is looking at the fine print. It's a very complex regulation governing our entire global GSP regime. So there are many interests in play. You know, Bangladesh is one of our partners, but we have, you know, over 140 diplomatic missions around the world engaging on trade and other issues. And all of that is a very complex picture. So what I'm pleased to see is that Bangladesh is making its voice heard in those deliberations in Brussels. And that's important that the policy views of this government here and of industry here are heard before that regulation is adopted within a year or two. So it will take some time, it's a long process, but we are engaged on it, and I think Bangladesh is engaged on it.
Ambassador, after Brexit, the EU market became really divided for Bangladesh because, you know, United Kingdom itself is a huge market for Bangladeshi product. So after this Brexit, do you think any kind of negative impact will be on Bangladesh on trade and business?
I don't. I think Bangladesh has a very good relations with both the UK and the EU. I mean, to put it in perspective, I think bilateral trade with the UK is something over €2 billion, and with the European Union market, it's over €14 billion. So the EU is a huge market, and the UK as a single country is a large market. So I don't see disadvantages. I think the only possible difficulties for Bangladesh exporters may come from the fact that the UK has left the single market and the customs union. So that means if you are a Bangladesh exporter and you want to import to Europe and the UK, you may in the end have different standards to comply with. So there may be, in the fullness of time, a divergence in regulatory standards that could make that kind of business, which covers the UK and Europe for a given seller, could make it complicated. But I have every faith that the relations between EU and Bangladesh will thrive on the trade front, and similarly with the UK, given the historic ties and you know, long-standing relations with both of us. So,
what do you think? What should be the focus for Bangladeshi investors, Bangladesh government, or other agencies to increase the bilateral trade with EU and Bangladesh?
I think first of all diversification. So at the moment the Bangladesh economy is very concentrated still, and I know there are big efforts underway to change that, and you see news about car production in Bangladesh, mobile phone, medicine, you know, and that's, as I mentioned, the CNN advert, Make Dreams Come True in Bangladesh. You know, it's clear that there are these efforts at diversification, because any economy that's too reliant on one product is vulnerable, I would say. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is we're very interested in making investment by European countries more easy in Bangladesh. And we have a continuing dialogue with the government on that and with business, because there are some impediments, for example, on foreign ownership and on standards and regulatory standards. And I think we want to get more traction on removing those barriers. I learned something very interesting yesterday that, you know, there are these success stories. Bangladesh is the biggest purchaser of power generators from a huge company in Finland. So we have big sales through this company to the Bangladeshi market. But we have big companies here, not only in garments, in cement and elsewhere. And what I hear from the commercial counterparts when they speak to me, the European business, often it's to say there's too much red tape. We could do a lot more if red tape were reduced, but it's not quite happening to the degree we'd like to see yet. So for me, those two things, diversification and regulatory reform, making it easier for European business, would be essential to make sure
in that case, Ambassador, you know, investment, especially FDI, is a big priority issue of Bangladesh government right now. And they are making some special economic zone. It's almost 100. So what are the thinking of EU investors, big investors and big companies to invest here in Bangladesh in solar energy, in power energy, exploring hydrocarbon in our deep sea, you know, we have a big deep sea. So is there any formal conversation going on this issue? I want to know this answer, and I have many more questions to you, but before then I have to take a break.
Okay.
দর্শক, আমরা ছোট্ট একটা বিরতি নিচ্ছি, ফিরছি একটু পরে কথা বলবো ঢাকা ইউ এর মিশন প্রধানের সঙ্গে। আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকবেন নিশ্চয়ই। দর্শক অনেক ধন্যবাদ যারা এতক্ষণ সংযুক্ত ছিলেন এবং স্বাগত যারা এই মুহূর্তে যুক্ত হয়েছেন। আমরা কথা বলছি ঢাকা ইউরোপীয় ইউনিয়নের রাষ্ট্রদূত চার্লস হোয়াইটলির সঙ্গে। অ্যাম্বাসেডর চার্লস হোয়াইটলি, my question was regarding the investment. You know, Bangladesh is keen for foreign direct investment as our economy is going very fast, and we are making some new special economic zone and other area. So what is the thinking of big EU investors about investment here in Bangladesh? Are really they interested, and if they are interested, what kind of challenge they are facing?
I think that's certainly the case that many investors are eyeing Bangladesh. The word is spreading. You know, you've seen the promotion abroad that the government and business has done, the Bengal tiger, you know, in various countries. So I think the message is getting through that Bangladesh is open for business. But as I mentioned before, it's very important that we see some of these unnecessary impediments that discriminate between foreign investors and domestic companies. That needs addressing, I think, to give that extra shot of confidence that will attract big investors. And of course, it's important that investment comes in the right way, that it supports local jobs, supports local development and technological advance in Bangladesh itself. So I'm keen to see that, you know, that the right kind of investment is attracted. But certainly the message, as I said, is getting out there that Bangladesh is open for business. And people are looking again at Bangladesh and thinking, that is a place that I would like to bring my company to work. So we see that. We have inquiries. We're hoping to set up a new European chambers to help direct that and give added impetus. So I'm pleased that we have some traction with the government when we discuss impediments to investment. We have a business climate dialogue every year with the Ministry of Commerce, Foreign Ministry and other key business players. So the voice of business of European business is heard directly here by the government. They understand what the challenges are, and I think given the emphasis that the government is placing on attracting investment, we can expect to see some of these irritants to trade being removed.
So what are the area of investment might be for the EU investors?
I think you know, the world is the oyster. There are so many areas now where Bangladesh could offer you know, offer attractive business terms. We're very interested in catalyzing engagement on climate change and technology related to climate change because, you know, renewable energy is up and coming. I think Bangladesh government has said that they want to have a certain percentage of energy from renewables. So we have 40 million euros planned for this year on climate change and renewable energy, which is a small sum, but it's supposed to be combined with loans as well from investments, international financial institutions. So actually it could catalyse up to $500 million to support Bangladesh's transition in the green sense and towards renewable energy. And that should bring along business opportunities, I think. So it's not just the public sector working out solutions, you have to involve the private sector. And I think many of our companies in Europe are very well attuned to bringing technology to bear in the climate change field and in the renewable energy field, and that should be a win-win for both Bangladesh.
You know, Bangladesh have a big deep sea, and after and now we have no problem with regarding sea with our two neighbors, India and Myanmar. So it's a huge opportunity to explore hydrocarbon and other things from deep sea, but still we can't have the data. As well as international oil companies are not so interested so far. So can you play any role regarding these issues?
I mean, if it's a well-known issue, and as you say, these difficulties have been removed, I'm not aware of any European company that's actively seeking to get involved there, but I think that time will come. I'm sure there are others eyeing that opportunity. And it's an important opportunity. There are other opportunities like the import and export of electricity to and from Nepal across that short stretch of India.
Hydropower.
Yeah, hydropower. Solar power, of course, there's some experimentation in Bangladesh with that. So I think wind power, I understand there are certain challenges to making that a realistic source, but we're trying to help thinking on that. We have various studies that we're supporting. And certainly the hydrocarbon issue is one of interest. We aren't looking at supporting further investment, for example, in coal-fired plants. I think Bangladesh itself has said they won't proceed with, I think, 10 of the planned plants. So it's all to play for in terms of the green transition, and I think the EU is well positioned to work with Bangladesh on that green transition because we're doing the same thing in our own countries, you know.
And you know, globally, Bangladesh position is very strategical. So the USA as well as China and India is our neighbor. So all the world is looking at Bangladesh and they want to make a good relation with Bangladesh. So sometimes there are some groups and subgroups, alliance, regional alliances formed, and everyone Bangladesh to their side. But you know the foreign policy of Bangladesh is friendship to all and malice to none. So do you really think Bangladesh can manage its foreign policy as China is blooming as big economic power, which is a big headache for USA and other countries?
I think, first of all, Bangladesh's diplomatic weight is certainly growing. I mean, we see now Bangladesh is the chair of the IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, for 2 years. That's a huge opportunity, yeah, and lots of members from different, of different interests. Bangladesh is chairing the Climate Vulnerable Forum and the V8 and so on. So I think in areas also where Bangladesh has particular expertise, like climate change, there's a particular attention to Bangladesh's voice, whether that voice comes from business or the government or diplomats. But you're right, there's a huge strategic shift happening, and there are two very, very big players in the neighborhood, China and India. We as EU, we've just released our Indo-Pacific strategy, and Bangladesh is a key focus for that. Our new envoy for the Indo-Pacific strategy is set to come to Bangladesh as soon as COVID allows, and that will be one of his first ports of call, because we do see the strategic value of Bangladesh, and we do appreciate the philosophy that you just mentioned of friendship to all, malice to none. That's exactly in tune with how the EU tries to conduct our foreign affairs. Of course, we have interests and we have tensions with different players. That's inevitable. But the founding basis of our foreign policy is also the founding basis of the European Union, which is a peace project. You know, if you think about the wars that.
So it's not anything defense or military initiative. I'm telling about Indo-Pacific.
The Indo-Pacific, no, it's very much focused on connectivity, on political engagement, on trade ties, and on infrastructure, for example. So I think they're all areas where we're active with Bangladesh, and that really helps make Bangladesh a focus of our efforts in the region. And of course, we have certain strategic interests. You know, we're the #1 investor as EU in the Indo-Pacific, and we want to make sure that the free shipping channels are kept open, that no one dominates those open sea international channels that is important to trade, important to Bangladesh, but also important to the EU.
So in that case, Bangladesh should, you think Bangladesh should join Indo-Pacific strategy? As you also said, Bangladesh is a key partner for Indo-Pacific, as well as Quad, as well as Belt and Road Initiative of China. So what Bangladesh should do, definitely that decision will be taken by Bangladesh people and government. But being a development partner, you prefer Bangladesh to join in the Pacific?
I don't think there's any incompatibility. Bangladesh has its interests with all players, and of course has its relations with big players in the region. And our Indo-Pacific strategy, I would stress, it's a very benign strategy. It's about building partnerships. We also launched the Global Gateway Initiative, which is an infrastructure project, 300 billion euros worldwide. And that's about connectivity too, and Bangladesh is a key focus for that strategy. So for me, Bangladesh manages its own foreign relations, we manage ours, but there is such a commonality of interest in so many ways that it's inevitable that our relations with Bangladesh will grow closer and closer, whatever happens in terms of Bangladesh's relations with other players in the region.
Yeah, and you know, there are some global challenges also, global common challenges like terrorism, extremism and other issues. Do you really find still terrorism is a big challenge for a country like Bangladesh?
I think we all face the challenge of terrorism. I mean, I've talked to security experts here. One of the frightening things that we're all facing is the phenomenon of the lone wolf. You know, you can't always trace action. You know, it's not always an organization doing a classic attack, you know, like we used to see in Europe, you know, in various European countries 20, 30 years ago. Now lone wolves are radicalized on the internet. It's almost impossible to control that phenomenon, but we're all trying. And I think Bangladesh, like the EU, is trying to get a grip on that. And of course, we've seen that there have been arrests of you know, extremists in Bangladesh. Thankfully, there hasn't been an attack recently, either, you know, in recent years. So it's important to tackle that and to tackle radicalization, I would say. And that's something where we can learn from each other. We're both facing this phenomenon. We have large, you know, ethnically diverse and religiously diverse populations in Europe, all of whom, you know, want a peaceful Europe. But then we have radicalization, both from the religious side, but also from, you know, as we saw in Norway, of right-wing terrorists who want to murder religious minorities. So I think it's a big challenge for security services, but we can only do things better if we talk to each other, and that's exactly what we do in our relations with Bangladesh. We talk and learn from each other, I think, on this issue.
Yeah, and Bangladesh is an innocent victim of Rohingya crisis because we do have no fault and we are not responsible for this crisis, but we are suffering the most. We are suffering environmentally, in Cox's Bazar. We are suffering insecurity issues also because, recently some people killed even inside the camp. And sometimes Bangladesh government said there are very bad people, some terrorist group also might active in the Rohingya camps. So do you really think that Rohingya crisis, if it will continue, only Bangladesh will suffer, or it could be a threat for the whole region?
That's a very good question. I think, first of all, we appreciate so much Bangladesh's efforts to take care of over 1 million people who arrived, as you say, through no fault of Bangladesh, through events over the border in Myanmar. And any country would be, face huge challenges in doing that. And I've been to the camps once. I'm going again next week because we support, with about 70 million euros a year, humanitarian and development assistance in the camps. But as you say, it's a very daunting thing, and I think it's very important that the international community stands side by side with Bangladesh in that endeavour. Also because we simply do not know when the refugees will be able to return. They have to go back on a voluntary and safe basis, but we all know what the situation is in Myanmar. And it is the case that the security in the camps is a very challenging thing. And it doesn't just have implications for Bangladesh, as you imply. It has implications because, as we discussed, Bangladesh is a strategic part of the region. They have ties with surrounding countries, and we hope and pray that the Rohingya crisis doesn't turn into a factor of instability. And by remaining a steadfast partner of Bangladesh on this with others, I think we can try to avert that scenario by ensuring that services are delivered in the camps, education is delivered in the camps, nutrition and social services. That will help to stop the kind of forces that could precipitate radicalism or other instability. So that's certainly my message, that we will stand with Bangladesh on this as long as it takes, and that we are also pushing Myanmar to take the steps necessary to allow the return.
That's the big question, because our partners, especially the European countries and USA even, they are very much with Bangladesh on humanitarian issues. But the ultimate solution is repatriation, and that's need the political goodwill of Myanmar government. So still there is a discussion going on why the Western friends and the world friends not pushing effective pressure on Myanmar to get back its own people to their motherland. So that's my question. So what would be your answer? I like to hear, but before that I have to take a break again. দর্শক আবারও ছোট্ট একটা বিরতি নিচ্ছি, আমরা কথা বলবো ইউ রাষ্ট্রদূতের সঙ্গে, আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকবেন নিশ্চয়ই। দর্শক স্বাগত আরেকবার, আমরা কথা বলছি ইউ রাষ্ট্রদূতের সঙ্গে, অ্যাম্বাসেডর চার্লস। My question is why European countries and other big countries not putting huge political pressure on Myanmar to get back his people from Bangladesh?
Well, we are doing. I mean, we've taken quite a few steps, from sanctions to suspending development assistance and continuing with humanitarian assistance, because it's important, of course, to not punish the people of Myanmar. The problem is with the regime in Myanmar. So we've also taken action in the UN. I personally negotiated the resolution for the EU and the OIC on Myanmar and the Rohingya refugees for 2 years in New York. So we try to stimulate the international community to do more. I think what I would ask is why certain other partners, large partners who are friends of Bangladesh, are not doing more themselves, who are in the immediate region and who can actually bring more influence to bear than realistically others can. So I think the EU is determined to do its best to put pressure on, but unfortunately, as we discussed, there's no magic wand to make that country a safe place for the refugees. I hope that will happen, that's the aspiration, but there's no sign of it yet. So
repatriation will not be so easy, or it will not happen in the upcoming 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, I think everybody's agreed it can only happen when the conditions are safe and on a voluntary basis, and the government of Bangladesh has stressed that also. And I don't have a crystal ball to guess when that will be, but all I can say is from our point of view, we want to keep putting pressure on the Myanmar government and keep supporting Bangladesh in this very daunting endeavour of supporting so many people within its territory, but absolutely with the same goal, which is to get those refugees back as soon as possible. And every survey amongst the refugees indicates that the vast, vast majority want to go home. They don't want to stay in camps.
Bangladesh have tried to make a tripartite arrangement with Dhaka, Beijing, and Myanmar. But that also not working. At the same time, the military again came power in Myanmar. So do you really think it make things more complicated, the recent regime? Yeah?
For certain, absolutely. I think it makes things more complicated. There are different conflicts going on within their borders. The EU is also engaging on the bigger political and human rights issues in Myanmar beyond the Rohingya issue. Of course, Aung San Suu Kyi is now facing the judicial process and no longer free. So Myanmar has transformed dramatically in the last year or two, and that's in nobody's interest to see a military-led regime that is oppressing different parts of the population, including the Rohingya, and the instability that brings close to the border of Bangladesh and to others.
But Excellency, most of the European countries still continue their investment in Myanmar, except Germany. Only Germany said that they will not invest anymore, as human rights violation is a big issue for European Union. So why the other European countries are still investing not only on Rohingya issues, but they are doing business with this Myanmar government?
I think commercial interests have continued to some degree, but I think also, as I said, what we don't want to do is punish the people of Myanmar. So I think what it's right to look at is whether any of that business is in any way supporting the military regime. If you look at, for example, the very big garments industry, as I mentioned briefly before, employing lots and lots of women, we wouldn't want to see that closed down overnight. So it's right that that investment is scrutinized to see whether it props up the regime. But if it's going to areas where the military doesn't have a commercial interest, then it can only be supporting the people of Myanmar. So it's a complex picture. I think it would be difficult to say all investment must stop. That would punish the people as well as the regime. So.
Ambassador Charles, what are the priority issues of Bangladeshi relationships? Sometimes you said that is good governance, that is democracy, that is human rights, that is press freedom, and other issues. Right now, what are your priority issues?
We have a very multifaceted relationship. I mean, if you look back to 2001, when we signed our big cooperation agreement with Bangladesh, that captured all our shared priorities, and that is trade, it's development assistance, it's climate change, it's cooperation in different fields, whether it be scientific, people to people, education. We had 139 students going under the Erasmus Scholarship Scheme to Europe. And of course also human rights and democracy. That's a part of our relations with every country around the world, and it's agreed by the 27 EU foreign ministers from the member states that it should be a priority. So naturally we talk about these issues with every government around the world, and that's part of a healthy, mature relationship for sure.
You know, on the very last time of 2021, Bangladesh, one of our security agency, RAB, they got sanctioned from USA. Do you have any comment on this? Because the priority of present US government, I mean Biden administration and EU, seems to be the same. So is there any chance to have any impact on Bangladesh on this sanction with the relation with the EU?
Well, I mean, we are like-minded partners of the US on many human rights issues. Of course, we don't agree on everything. For example, many states in the US still retain the death penalty, and that's not something the EU values. But it's a decision by the United States government. I have every respect for their decision. It's nothing to do with the European Union, so I wouldn't comment in detail on it. But of course, it's down to the relations between the US and Bangladesh to address this issue, and I think it is being discussed between the two governments. The EU is not implicated in that particular issue at all.
Is there any chance to have any impact on our trade, especially on your market, which is a big destination for our garments and other sectors?
I mean, from an EU perspective, I don't think any commercial decisions will be made on the basis of policy act by the United States. I think the decisions are made on the basis of, can we do business well in Bangladesh? Can we establish good trading relations? What are the opportunities? So frankly, I don't think there's any commercial implication. Of course, it sends a political signal from the US side, and people pay attention to that. The US is the world's superpower, and it sends a very important signal from their side. But from an EU business point of view, I don't see any connections.
Yeah, you know, there are a lot of rumors are going on, especially in the TTVL, that UN, you know, Bangladesh is a big partner of UN peacekeeping mission. So, and US is a big contributor on that mission. Almost 30% or more than 30% cost is managed by US government. So sometimes it's said that it might hamper our peacekeeping mission even in UN. You are a big partner with UN, definitely. So what's your assumption?
I would say from our point of view, the Bangladesh contribution is first of all extremely appreciated. Such a large contributor, and Bangladesh has paid the price in blood on occasion for that commitment to world peace. I think everybody sees the immense dedication of Bangladesh troops and other actors who take part in UN peacekeeping missions. So from my point of view, Bangladesh is irreplaceable in this function, and the intense appreciation that we have for that is something that will drive our position. We are, in a sense, also a peacekeeping entity as the EU. We have several military missions around the world and civilian missions, and I hope actually this is an area where we want to work more closely with Bangladesh on security and defence, and that's in the pipeline. We launched a new political dialogue that will begin this year in Dhaka at a high level, and that part of that will be looking at our interests in the security field and peacekeeping. So I think Bangladesh is doing a magnificent job on that front.
Yeah. Ambassador Charles, how do you evaluate the human rights situation here in Bangladesh?
I think like any country, it's a complex story. I mean, as I said, we have human rights as a point in all our relations with countries. I think the main point is that it's not just about foreigners evaluating a human rights situation, it's about working constructively to learn from each other. And that we're trying to do, you know, on issues of key concern in human rights. We have a dialogue with the government on that, so they're very open to discussion. But of course we follow all the issues you would expect us to follow that are of concern and that the UN has highlighted, also in the Universal Periodic Review in Geneva through the UN Human Rights Council. So it's an important part of relations, and as I said before, an important part of a mature relationship, and that's what we have with Bangladesh now, a wide-ranging partnership.
Ambassador Charles, we know democracy is your big priority area of working. And especially in Bangladesh, during election, we find some activities from our development partners, especially the big countries and big missions like US, EU, Australia, Canada, India, China, and their movement before or during election time to make the election participatory, to make the election more acceptable and other things. Election is just after 1 year, the national election supposed to be held here in Bangladesh. So do you have any eyes on these issues, and what the role of diplomats, like especially EU diplomats, you have 9, 10, 11 missions in Dhaka, what would be their role then?
I mean, I think for any democracy around the world, also in the European Union, any democracy has to, of course, have free elections, and almost as importantly, those elections have to be seen to be free. So we've seen elections around the world that have been disrupted by, you know, social media campaigns and so on. And when I say seen to be free, I think that means that there's scrutiny of the election. And as I say, that means first and foremost, for example, in Bangladesh, there's a very good network of domestic observer organizations. You have your own organizations that are able to look at your elections and make a determination. Of course, the man in the street who goes to vote will make his own determination about the elections. So I think we place, as you say, part of the founding values of the European Union is democracy, and it's important that elections are participatory and that they are taking place in conditions that are free and fair, and that's our starting position wherever we are in the world. And in our own systems, we have scrutiny of our own elections in Europe. We have the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which is not an EU body, it's the OSCE. When there's an election in an EU member state, often we get observers to come and look and say, because no election is perfect, and then they make constructive proposals to how to improve the system. So I think that's needed everywhere. And as I say, there is expertise here in Bangladesh. And in the past, we've supported civic education and observation activities. It's too early now to say what we might do to support that process, but it's definitely something we're watching with great interest.
In recent past, sometimes we have seen that EU was very much interested to send their own observer team during national election. And recently, our local government election is going on. So definitely, you know what's happened on this election. It's sometimes it's seen it's very participatory. Sometimes it's seen that some big political parties are not attending these elections. So on the upcoming general election, is there any plan to send observer from European Union or European Commission?
But every year we send about 30 election observation missions around the world, and as you can imagine, it's quite a difficult process to decide where those observation missions should go, and it rests very much on an invitation from the government of any given country, a host government. So at the moment we haven't proposed anything. We are looking at our priorities for the coming years, and in our own member states, as you know, there are big elections coming up in France, which everybody is watching very closely. Certainly, we are very proud of our election observation mechanism, and we want to make it work optimally around the world. But as I said, it also depends on where the resources are best placed and whether there's an invitation.
So you are observing the situation, then the ultimate decision will come.
Precisely. I mean, observing the situation meaning across the world, where the elections will be happening in 2023 and where we might most effectively deploy our resources.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your valuable time. Thank you. দর্শক, আমরা কথা বলছিলাম ঢাকা ইউরোপীয় ইউনিয়নের রাষ্ট্রদূতের সঙ্গে, এবং তিনি যেমনটি বলছিলেন যে বাংলাদেশের সঙ্গে ইউরোপীয় ইউনিয়নের যে সম্পর্ক সেটা দীর্ঘদিনের পরীক্ষিত, প্রমাণিত, ফলে সেই জায়গায় তাদের প্রাধান্য কোন ইস্যুগুলো পাবে এবং সে জায়গায় বাংলাদেশি বা কী করা উচিত সে বিষয়ে তার পরামর্শ দিয়েছেন। পরবর্তী পর্বে দেখা হবে নতুন কোনো অতিথির সঙ্গে। সে পর্যন্ত ভালো থাকবেন সবাই। অনেক ধন্যবাদ।